tonight on the Little Beauty. And Port Adelaide fallen away after two very bad losses. What's going on? And Adelaide, they've started in the perfect way, but some big tests to come. All right, let's do this. Welcome to the Game On podcast. My name's Pete, once again joined here in the studio with Malcolm. We do apologise for not being on the air last week. I caught the old COVID and unfortunately was sounding a hell of a lot worse than what I usually do. So sorry for that. But, mate, I'm not even going to ask you what the best part of your week was, because I think we already know South Australia winning the Shield.
Yeah, it was a pretty nerve-wracking 4 days down there at KRIEVS. And look, first off, I think we're all very quick to criticise something when it doesn't work, but hats off to the Saka. It was a fantastic atmosphere down at KRIEVS.
Yep.
And look, 4,000 to 5,000 each day at KRIEVS was a better atmosphere there than at Adelaide Oval. And on the first day when we bowled him out for 95 and Brendan Doggett takes the 6 for,
yes,
I said to the person I was sitting there with as there was a big round of applause and the atmosphere, I said, at Adelaide Oval, he's going back to field fine leg in front of the scoreboard where there's not one person. And, yeah, it really worked. It was the village green. You took your own chair and that sort of thing. And, look, it worked. Touch of irony on the last day, mate. I had to leave in the tea break because I was working at Nords. So there was a fair bit of frustration in that regard there. I'm thinking this is quite amusing that a Shield moron who's basically gone to every
early
game.
Yep.
Probably the 90% of Shield games since I've been 10.
Yep.
So, yeah, I had to leave, but was pretty confident at tea when we were 3 for 186.
All right, let's get into Around the Grounds and we'll talk some more cricket.
Around the Grounds.
All right, coming up a little bit later, we're going to talk the soccer, the SANFL, SANFLW, but let's kick off with the cricket. You've already mentioned there some match highlights, but really that first day was set up, wasn't it, that wicket just kept falling after, time and time again, and you're thinking, hang on.
Well, Queensland are none for 15.
Yep.
We've dropped Khawaja twice at that stage, so you're thinking, geez, Then Khawaja gets out. 15 minutes later, they're 4 for 18. They lose 4 for 3.
Yep.
Clayton pushes the first ball to cover. It was like watching an under-10 kid that he was excited he hit the ball, so therefore it must be a run, and runs, and Liam Scott pings the stumps down. Incredible, 95. And you're thinking, right, come on, guys, just bat well. Game can be over at stumps.
Yes.
Just get 2 for 130 at stumps and the game's gone.
Yep. Were you surprised, just before you go on with that, were you surprised that South Australia decided to bowl first? Considering the match before they batted and batted and batted and batted?
A little bit.
Yep.
But the thought was that whatever was going to be in the wicket was going to be in there early.
Yep.
Also, the fact that the Shield final rules are now done on bonus points if there's a draw, South Australia sort of wanted to know what they were going to be chasing in the 100 potentially in the 100 overs.
Yep.
Also, the fact that Karen Rolton the week before, the pitch just had not deteriorated 1 ounce, and the players reckon you could have played for about 8 days before it would have been a result. So there was that thought process there as well. And then so when we bowled him out for 95, we really didn't bat that well. To be 6 for 158, and after being 6 for 116, and thank goodness Jake Lehman and Ben Menenti batted pretty well on that first day. And the game then ebbed and flowed, and it looked like, and look, I will give Cricket Australia, I want to give a bake here, that if you're going to have the rule on the camera decides whether it's a no ball, spend the bloody money that you do for a test match. So the cameras are exactly the same as what there are for a test match, and you can see it quite clearly. It was like watching the D-grade cameras. I've probably watched that ball from Brendan Doggett 30 times now. One camera angle, it looks like it's fine. The other one looks like it might be a no ball by a millimetre or two. I actually thought Jordan Buckingham's to McDermott in the first innings was a no ball. It wasn't called. spend the money on the cameras or don't have them at all.
Yep.
And do it properly. How you do it for a test match or don't do it at all.
But I mean, it's the pinnacle event, isn't it? It's a final. You would expect that you are putting that technology to use, and for such an important game, really, at the end of the day.
We boast in Australia that we've got the best domestic competition in the world. It's the constant boast of Australian cricket. Well, for goodness sake, money's not the obstacle. It's not like, because I did ask the great man, Les Burdett, I said, right, well, how about financially if it's at Adelaide Oval on how much things goes? It's irrelevant, Malcolm. Mm-hmm. So you got that comment from the great one.
Yes.
Therefore, why in the hell they didn't have the proper cameras? And they were Mickey Mouse.
Yep.
And at one stage, the game stopped for 6 minutes deciding whether a ball from Nathan McAndrew, whether he hit it, whether it was 4 or not. Mm-hmm. Get on with the game. Out of that, if you've got the decent camera with that, we can see it straight away.
Yep. Or let the umpires officiate,
just
and
bang,
it is
bang,
what it
and
is.
that's what it is.
Yep.
One or the other. So that was a really annoying.
Yep.
But the game ebbed and flowed. So 95, and then Jake and that Manenti gets out to a half tracker, just didn't hit, smashed it, but McDermott caught it, didn't get it high enough. Frustration where because Nathan McAndrew can bat, and got out 10 minutes before lunch. Where if we'd gone to lunch on the second day at 7 I think that would have been enough.
Makes it harder, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yep. And so 180 on the front on this innings. Now it's flattened right out. It's not game over. And then if I said what I really thought about one LBW decision being given not out for Labuschagne off Liam Scott, don't worry, you'd be doing plenty of editing, Pete.
Yep,
so I'll leave it.
I haven't got the dump button organised tonight.
I really think what I thought there.
Yes.
And that, so we didn't have much luck there. And I thought we got a bit down on ourselves. I thought became a bit, because Wilderness played 2 great innings in a row in terms he made 100 the last Shield game against us, smashed us to get Queensland in on the batting bonus point.
Yes.
He batted beautifully again. And I thought we got a bit woe is us here with a partnership.
Yep.
And got away. But then once we got that 8th wicket, then bang. So 270. I was reasonably confident.
Yep.
And I am a negative person in general.
Well,
so I was reasonably confident.
You look at what's happened previously and you think, it hasn't quite happened this year. Can they just hold it off for one more match rather than fall back into old habits?
At 3 for 28, obviously you're more than nervous, but I did say, well, I think Sanger and Carey are both. Carey's our best player.
Yes.
Carey's made 741 runs this year for South Australia at an average of 86. He had a fantastic year. 400s. When Alex plays...
Well, good on him for putting his hand up to play, wasn't he?
Brilliant.
Yep.
And I can't emphasise my admiration. Alex played himself available at every single time.
Yep.
Even the Champions Trophy, where it looked like we might make the semis, there was Alex over in Una Whoop Whoop in Pakistan trying to organise his own flight to get to Melbourne to play in that Shield game.
Yep. Gets
back after the Champions Trophy. Within an hour, he's rung Rhino, and because we didn't have to win our last game.
No.
You could have that off. No, shit.
But he wanted to have hit.
I'm playing.
Yep.
I want to bat. I need to keep. I want to bat against the ball which bounces a bit more compared to over here. So his attitude has just been incredible. And look, the first innings, I think he was too toey.
Yes.
And I actually said to his mum, I think, give him a beer before he bats on the second. And he wants this so much, Malcolm. And Gordon had said to me earlier in the year, his dad, that he blamed himself for a shot he played down at Glenelg and that sort of thing. And you could just see how focused he was. And look.
Sometimes it takes to lose one to win one because of that.
Look, he's a fantastic It's cliche stuff.
Yes.
But honestly, my admiration for the Carey family couldn't be any higher. The Carey family are fantastic.
Absolutely. Just a bit of a heads up, we are actually trying to get Kez on the program, so keep listening, and we'll let everybody know when that obviously happens. What a first year for Rhino. Look, we've spoken to him on the podcast a couple of times now.
Will happen again. He's off to Bali soon, so we'll leave him alone for a bit.
Absolutely. He's well and truly earned his holiday. But let's take it a step back for the last couple of years. I think some of that kudos has to go to Jason Gillespie as well, doesn't it?
There've been some improvement, a bit of improvement. Look, Jason Sanger, just an inspired recruit in terms of his average isn't great.
Yes.
And you watch now and you sort of can't work it because he's only 25.
Mm-hmm.
So he's an inspired recruit. I think he'll end up playing Test cricket.
Yes.
So I think he's a fantastic recruit now. Yeah, look, it'd be great to get some more South Australians in the side. I can't argue that, but the buy-in in general from Nathan McSweeney, Nathan McAndrew, who bowled to the cows, came in and just keeps every ball. Jordan Buckingham, never afraid to call a spade a spade.
Mm-hmm.
Just the whole buy-in from everyone.
Yep.
And look, Bucky got made 12th man in a game in Melbourne a couple of years ago, and he wasn't happy, but he flew back himself to play for West Orange in the district game on a Sunday instead. So just the whole buy-in by that group in general has been fantastic.
Would you say that's Rhino's big strength, is that he's been able to manage as well as obviously impart some of the knowledge that he's picked up, obviously, through the Australian programs that he's been involved with?
Oh, it is, and he was very firm that it'd be a bowling cartel, the fast bowling cartel, and it would change over. You would be rested. So he set that all down right from the start.
Yep.
So, Thornton, Conway, Wezagar, there's been 22 players have all played a part.
Yes.
And we won the double. Let's not also forget that we won the one day. First time in 13 years and the Shield first time in 29 years. I'm being honest, I'm still pinching myself, I think.
Mate, we sat here at the beginning of the Shield season and, it was a little bit of doom and gloom as to, when's this going to happen? 8 months later, South Australia champions.
Oh, and resounding minor premiers too, in terms of champions at the end of this. End of it. We were 15 points clear on top. Our most successful season ever away in the 6-team state competition. So there's been some incredible things have happened this year. The ridiculous game in Tasmania where they're chasing 400 and lose 4 for and 4 for in the last 9 balls. It was just incredible. It was ridiculous.
The resilience is probably the word that you wouldn't throw around too much for South Australian cricket for the last 15, 20 years.
Well, there's been 10 wooden spoons in 15 years, I think it was. So there's been a lot of times there where, Andrew Capel writing the article where he asked me, so Andrew Capel asked, and I made the line of, hang on, we used to celebrate when we won a session, let alone a day, let alone a game. And that's what it was. It was the doom and gloom amongst the South Australian supporters. And you sort of went with that because that's what happened and that, and to walk out after we beat Victoria and going, shit, third time I've walked out Adelaide Oval in a row when we've won. Just not used to this and things like that. And before the end, it was just awesome. It would have been great. It's interesting too, and I think Nathan did sort of refer very cleverly and that. There was only 122 people when we beat Tasmania on the last day. Be great to see that some of those people who turned up on the last day actually turn up at Shield games in general, but that's life.
Do you think because of the way that it was set up, we'll talk about Karen Rolton in a minute because that's a totally different situation. But with the cricket season almost sort of coming to an end for domestic players, that they were actually able to get to a lot more games? Do you think that played a little bit of a part in it?
I don't know. It's just really hard. How the seasons overlap so much. You know, you've got the AFL game on the radio listening while you're watching. And where there used to be a gap between cricket and footy, and we know those days are gone. But I do think the boutique oval, for want of a better saying, and it's cliche stuff, I think it actually works better for Shield cricket.
Yes. Well, I think we're seeing that more and more everywhere, really, aren't we? Victoria playing out of Junction Oval, Sydney
out of Cricket Central.
Exactly right.
Yeah, so I think it is. And so that was all the carry-on with Adelaide Oval. The only other WA would have played at the WACA. Well,
technically that's their second oval, isn't it?
Yeah, technically, but that's their main cricket oval for Shield cricket. So Tasmania was the only ground I wasn't sure what would have happened. But every other state, Queensland, the final would have been Allan Borderfield. Sydney Cricket Central.
Victoria Junction Oval.
So, you've got to remember there. So,
Well,
look, it worked.
All right, let's talk about Karen Rolton Oval now. Is this a case of now they've made this their home, their fortress, and this will be where it's at from now on, or...
Just not sure. The city council is so hard to deal with.
Yep.
As we know, realistically, those temporary grandstands should just stay up.
Yes.
If there was a word called common sense used,
Yep.
it'd be done because it was actually a really good viewing spot.
Yep.
I think a few of us were quite surprised how good a viewing spot it was.
Yes.
So little things like that, and look,
the location is a little bit hard.
It's
hard
not
to
great
get
to get to, although the tram does stop right at the front.
That's
I did
right.
get the
Yep.
bus and the tram in one day, the bus from the Paradise Interchange, and then got walk from Frome Road over to North Terrace for the train. So it wasn't that hard.
No.
Because parking is a nightmare down there.
No, I totally get that.
Yeah.
But, those boutique stadiums that are in a transport corridor, I suppose is what you call it, it works. But temporary stands, like you said, just made the ground that more homely. And like you said, I reckon they should stay up.
Yeah, it looked fantastic. I have spoken to the CEO about catching up for a coffee with my ideas for trying to get people along and all that, so that will happen.
Yep.
So.
Looking forward to having it. Well, South Australia taking out their 14th Shield victory, first one since 1996, as we already know, 29 years, but also their fourth one-day cup win and first time since 2012 as well. So,
and obviously the first time we've ever done the double.
The double, that's exactly right. So, this can only mean one thing from here, and expectations obviously are high, but I think they're in a good little sweet spot at the moment, aren't they?
Oh, look, three South Australian players played Test cricket this year.
Yep.
Several others played one-days. The 2020, I don't really that one quite as much. But, you did have Spencer Johnson playing in the side in the championship trophy and all that. So look, and as I said, Jason Sanger, I think, has announced his arrival. He did make 300s for the year too. So
it's amazing what happens when you get a little bit of confidence in somebody who backs you no matter what.
Hopefully this is the start. And full credit, I think Nathan McSweeney is a very good leader. So full credit there.
Absolutely.
And look, Jake Lehman came back. So Jake,
struggling a little bit early.
And hopefully we'll have Jake on the show as well.
Struggled a little bit early, but then found his rhythm and away he went.
Huge last month. 468 runs in the month. Awesome.
Cream always rises to the top, doesn't it? All right, let's stick with cricket before we move on to AFL and footy. Young Gun receives a big contract boost ahead of returning to the Australian side. We've talked about it briefly off air. Surprising, yes.
I think he's a bit lucky.
Yep.
I don't think he's made the number of runs Sam Constas, which demands it.
Yep. Is this an eye to the future a little bit?
It is, and Nathan would be the first to say that unfortunately he didn't get hundreds in the last couple of games to put the pressure there because it was probably out of those two for the spot.
Yep.
But I do think Constas is, some of the shots he's played, the slog to get bowled off bowling in a Shield game, the charging, and there's still big question marks on it.
But is that youth though? Is that just somebody trying to find their equilibrium?
Yeah, but also I think they did deliberately pick him to go, right, we need someone to take Bumrah on.
The X factor.
Bumrah had been so, and he's played the lap shot and all that of the fourth over of a test match.
Yep.
Hang on, what the hell crap's this?
Yep.
But
it upset the apple cart. Yep.
Probably what effectively won that test match.
Yep.
So
fair enough. Obviously, South Australia could potentially be represented by 3 or 4 test players. Something like that hasn't happened for quite some time.
Yeah.
Really, really good. My last question, obviously, with that is Jake Fraser McGurk. Where is he at as far as the South Australian team goes? And obviously, he's playing in the IPL at the moment.
He's got to work out his game.
Yep.
I don't think he's done that yet because he's playing so much 2020. It's just stand and deliver. There's not a game plan. There's not to work and build an inning. So I think there's a lot of things to go there. And
can somebody mentor him with that though? Like a Travis Head or a...
Look, it's a maybe. I'm just not...
A Ricky Ponding maybe?
I don't think he's worked his game out enough. Now, I just, and he's a real huge question mark.
Okay.
And who's to say the money he's making out of 2020, he might just go that path.
Yep.
You know,
become a specialist.
Mitch Owen may well become yet. So, who knows?
Fair enough. All right, we're going to talk some IPL cricket next week. We've obviously wanted to dominate tonight's episode on the Shield win, but we've also got Premier Cricket and Div 2 cricket to talk about some grand finals.
Yeah, so Kensington, yet again, the inner belief of Kensington to get through, making 222. Lloyd Pope, 41 not out. Connor McFadden, 29, I reckon.
Yep.
I will look that up as we speak.
Yep.
Put on 50 to 60 odd for the last wicket, just to give them the total to bowl at. And we kept saying as the game was ebbed back and forth, looking at the scores, I was at Campbelltown watching Woodville and East Torrens. We kept going, if there's anyone who are going to win it,
yes,
it's Kensington.
Yep.
And sure enough, Pope, and apparently it was a half tracker and the guy got caught in the boundary. I haven't seen it.
No.
But he did.
Well, let's talk about Lloyd Pope. Is he the most unluckiest player for South Australia in this Shield final?
Oh, he was. There was no doubt about that.
Yep.
And he was incredibly unlucky that Karen Rolton didn't spin or break up the week before.
Yes.
They would have played him.
Yep.
And so there he missed out. So, yeah, Kensington batted first, made 222. Now, Henry Dahl, who'd struggled during the year, made 100 in the semi and then 45 in the grand final. There was a few other contributions.
Yes.
But Popey, 41 not out, and Cameron Fatchin, 29. So they put on 56, I think it is, for the last wicket. And then the game ebbed and flowed. And Teacher Gully but as always, Cameron Fatchin just finds a way. 18 overs, 3 maidens, 4 for 32. So he was the player of the final. And Kenzie yet again win yet another flag. Henry Thornton. And good on Henry Thornton and Pope both bank played.
Making themselves available. And that's why I asked whether Popey was a bit unfortunate to miss out on the Shield, but then obviously goes back and performs at the local level, which is fantastic.
And then the grand final in Div. So it's Div 1. It's first grade Div 2 is the way they call it.
Yep.
Now, under the ruling, East Torrens are minor premiers, so they are given the opportunity to bat
for 100 overs.
For 100 overs, of which they made 9 for 302, of which Cooper Luke made 109.
Yep.
And Louis Evans batted very well at the end, 69. So they've batted their 100 overs to make 9 for 302. So Woodville, therefore, have 78 overs because it was 80 overs less than 2 overs for changeover.
Yep.
So they've got 78 overs to chase. Now, I really just didn't get Woodville to mine, just didn't have a game. Seemingly their game plan was we just want wickets in hand.
But it's a grand final. You
really
I
just
have to
thought
leave.
they should have been, we want to be roughly this total at this level, roughly that total.
Yep.
Because I think at 31 overs on memory, I think they were 2 for 56.
Okay.
So the run rate kept crawling up. But then they got into a position where really they should have won. So Cameron Vadgia,
apologises for the pronunciations, but
that's the way it does sound.
Yes.
Made 114, and Harvey Brennan made 80. Now, those two got it down. So they were 3 for, needing 82 off the last 15 at 3 for.
Mm.
So if you just bat sensibly from there, you're virtually home. Now, Campbell tried a lap shot and got bowled, and then Harvey Brennan, look, he had hit 7 sixes. Mm-hmm. He'd hit the ball cleanly, some long balls, hit one ball out on the road.
Yep.
Tried to hit another 6, got caught on the boundary. Now, I would have loved him to have gone, right, I've got to be in at the end.
Keep it on the carpet and just
for a while.
Yep.
Then they fell right away. So, and incredibly, they only lost in the end by 15 runs.
Yep.
So I think if they'd had a game plan and been more organised, I think they could have won it. Yep. And I think they should have won. Yep. So full credit though to East Torrens. And in that, Dylan King took 6 for 65. So, it was an observer watching there because they got for 3 for 260. So they lost 7 for 29.
Yep.
So it was some really poor batting there.
That always hurts, no
yeah.
matter what game it is,
Yeah.
but in a grand final, it does happen. All right, let's move on. And as I said, we'll talk some IPL next week. All right, let's talk AFL. Adelaide have started the season with a bang, but how much is them and how much is their opposition?
Oh, look, they've been lucky in the draw. If you looked at the draw to start with, St Kilda, and they had a lot of players out.
Yep.
Home should win that. Essendon, Langford, and Ridley get injured the week before, so they're a bit down. Win that pretty easy. And then North Melbourne here. So they've got so far what they should have done. Have won the first 3 games.
Yep. Now, this weekend,
test,
we'll talk about this weekend in a minute. Or actually, we'll talk about it now. Gold Coast. What are you expecting from them? Because realistically, they probably should be favourites to probably go at least to a prelim final. Which is crazy talking about it after round 3, really, isn't it?
It is a bit early, but look, the Gold Coast side, and I'm one who's constantly raved on it, how much I rate the Gold Coast.
And you've watched them from a fair way out. I mean, we've been
list.
doing this podcast for almost 2 years now, and you've been saying they're going to come, they're going to come, they're going to come, and I reckon now they've arrived.
Oh, look, and they've still got some kids like Walter. In the under-18s, I'm sitting there with some, Paul Whaley and Jeff Morris, some really well-respected recruiters who've been around the mark. And Wales goes, don't worry about drafting him. He plays centre forward any side next week.
Yep.
Let alone now. Now, his body shape's had to change. There was a thing there. And he hasn't taken off yet, but you watch when he takes off.
It's going to be pretty scary.
And look, they've got Rao now. And people go, Anderson's gone way past him. And I kept thinking, nah. But it was more probably the question of Rao was he had a few injuries and his body shape.
Yep.
Now, he's gone and independently got this running coach. Now he's bursting clear of the side.
And he's changed his game from that inside
it's
hard
both.
nut
It's now
to now both.
Both.
That's exactly
and
right.
At the moment, he's the number 1 ranked player in the game.
Yep.
And so you've got, in terms of Witts, Rucking, and then the big 3 of Rao, Anderson, and Miller are the best just pure 4 in the comp.
Yep.
And they made Melbourne look stupid last week. That all of a sudden, it reminded you, Oliver and Viney are getting older.
Yes.
And 29, 30, and Rao made Oliver look stupid.
Yep.
I
mean, they were chasing after him at one stage and he's sprinting away.
Now, they're unlucky they've lost Ballard for a season entering ICL. And they've got Lombard. And you wait, he hurt himself early in the year. I'm still well and truly massive G for him as well.
Yep.
Geez, he's quick. I think they just bat so deep. If you just, Humphrey, get the Gold Coast side. I think they bat deeper than anyone else at the moment.
So you're talking about their 18th player to 25th player is better than any other side in the comp. Maybe apart from Brisbane.
Yeah, Brisbane, you've probably got a case there. Hawthorn, I think Hawthorn's more structure.
Yep.
GWS probably, but they've lost a few this week.
Yep.
This year, like your Perryman,
yes,
Peatling, Cumming, etc. So I just think Gold Coast, in terms of 2, they're recruiting Noble and Rioli. All of a sudden, not only that run off halfback, but the experience.
Yes.
You've got 200-plus game players.
Is that the final piece of their
puzzle?
It is. A bit like
Adelaide
have done the sort of same thing. And let's talk about Adelaide now. The 3-pronged or 4-pronged forward line of, if you throw Curtin in there as a taller option, is it going to be sustainable for the whole season, or is it going to be a bit of horses for courses?
We just got to wait and see. But at the moment, it's working, and they're not getting in each other's way.
No,
that's the key way. They seem to know exactly when to go, who's the one to lead up, who's the one then to drop off, then the kick and get it in Walker's hands, he can then kick and carry a line or a Dawson. Then we go back. So they seem very well organised in that regard. And Curtin's taking leaps and bounds each week. Now, Rochelle's a big out for him, but it will give Draper the chance to play a full game, I would think.
Yes. Let's talk about that in its sort of isolation right now. Who is the logical player to come in for Rochelle?
Draper.
Because, all right, so we say Draper, but then who goes onto the bench as the sub? because I've got my thoughts on it, and I heard a name today that I did not want to hear this year with the team
Yeah,
that
I
is.
agree. I'd be bitterly disappointed if
Would somebody like a Lukey Pedler be
I would
ideal, or
I
would you
would
play
play-
Nan Curvis?
I'd play one of those two
Right.
personally.
Yep, that's
Yeah.
where I'm at with it as well.
And I'd actually play Nankervis before Malira. I would have started Nankervis
Yep.
before Malira,
Yep.
personally.
Yep.
I would have played
Well, how have you
Malira
seen
as
his season so far?
scratchy. Not great defensively.
Yep.
Okay offensively,
Yep.
but he's not good defensively. I think Nankervis is a better player than him defensively.
Yep.
And I'm probably a defensive
Yes.
person watching, so I'm more a fan of
But
the
do
good
you
defender.
do you take his
He's good at it.
explosiveness and his X factor
And
into
the
account?
fact, I've still got to keep reminding myself, he's played so little football
Yep.
over the last 3 years.
Yep.
That's where I would have played him 6 games in the SANFL together, but they've started him there.
Yep.
You'd think there will hopefully just
Yep.
gradual improvement.
Yep. Horses for courses as
Yeah.
well with him as well. You don't want to really lose someone like a Nankervis. That's
Yeah.
the worry there.
Yeah, I rate Nankervis,
Yep.
so
And
it'll be interesting to see how they
I
go.
was surprised that they went with Borlase over Nankervis last week, but
Bit extra high.
bigger body.
Yes,
yeah,
yeah,
exactly right.
yeah.
All right, let's leave Adelaide there for the moment.
Yeah.
We'll talk about them a bit more in a minute when we do our tips. But Port Adelaide, 2 somewhat bad performances. Where does it leave Port Adelaide? Jason Horne-Francis doesn't look right. Now there's talk about Butters being traded or moving on, and that's a totally separate conversation in a minute. But Port Adelaide getting belted by Collingwood, strong response against Richmond.
It was only Richmond.
Correct. And then to fall away against Essendon when they seemingly had the game in hand, big
Yeah.
concerns, isn't it?
And it's also 2 away games, 2 losses. You've got to win some away games. And Port traditionally have been always good in that regard.
Yep.
But all of a sudden, in what was a pretty average game, Essendon wasn't a case of Essendon playing well.
Oh, no,
Both teams were terrible.
Yep.
So, I think there are big alarm bells, and it's a huge game for them this week because they play St Kilda and then they play Hawthorn next week. So, and if they lose both those 2 games, I really probably can't see them making the 8 because there's some away games to come as well. And that
Starting a little too far back, aren't you?
Yeah.
That was really the point of asking about Port Adelaide. I was not as bullish on them this year as some other teams were, just because we talked a little bit earlier on about Hawthorn and Gold Coast GWS batting that 18 to 25.
They're pretty unlucky.
Port Adelaide don't have that at the moment.
To
do
lose
they?
Marshall,
Yep.
Lukosius,
Butters,
and Lord.
Yep.
So you had the other 3. They've got 4 tall forwards on their list. 3 of them injured last week.
Yep.
So it's not easy in that regard.
But it still doesn't address their back line. That's where I had big concerns with.
Yeah, I agree.
And if the centre line doesn't fire or doesn't restrict, which it doesn't when you don't have a Butters in there and Rosie's down on form and
Rosie was good, but it was only he was reasonable. He was reasonable to good against Collingwood, considering they got annihilated.
Yes.
And he's 29. Very good against Richmond, but take that with a grain of salt.
Yep.
And then he was poor the other night. So I think there are so many Port players. If all of a sudden Butters out,
Mhm.
and unless Horne-Francis and Rosie dominate, a few of them then struggle to get the ball.
Yep.
So I think there's a domino effect there. And I think you're right also, list-wise, depth-wise, Burton and Jones injured.
Yep.
So, I think there's big question marks.
Absolutely.
Well and truly.
Certainly is. We'll talk about Port Adelaide a bit more in a minute when we do our tips as well. All right, pushing into contests. You've been big on this for probably the last 6 months. You were probably more for that forward being pushed in the back, but now it's sort of
both.
just changed a little bit that you're pushing people into contests.
It's both. Look, I still think it was ridiculous that Gibney wasn't suspended early in the year.
Yep.
Now, the AFL to come out last night and say, it was different. But, Gibney had to get going.
Yes.
And all of a sudden now, because
Layla broke his jaw. Yeah,
But that was dangerous.
Yes.
I think that was worse than this one.
Yes.
But outcome-based concussion, good. So Mansell was struggling there. Look,
Yep.
I will say, in the AFL's defence, as someone who reads the tribunal
Yep.
stuff pretty
The
thoroughly,
transcript.
the
Yeah,
transcript,
Yep.
I can see how they then came to that finding.
Yep. Well, they left no room for error, really,
No,
because
so
every argument that was made, it was rebutted pretty
Yeah.
quickly, going, you didn't make this and you didn't do that.
But I would also have loved them to come out and say, hey, we made a mistake on
Yep.
Gibney. And they just won't, as we know, will never, they're like Fonzie from Happy Days. They
Yep.
won't say wrong.
No.
They're
Yep. Will we start to see the umpires crack down on the push in the back a little bit more,
I hope so, because as I said,
especially for forwards?
it's ridiculous how many times there's a push in the back isn't paid.
Yep.
And they'll ping the poor bastard who's at the bottom of the pack who's had no chance.
Yes.
Yeah, I hate that.
Yep. It's going to be very interesting. All right, the big topic that's been going around, obviously, the last couple of days, players meeting with opposition coaches or opposition clubs. Are we mature enough yet to openly accept what's going on?
No, we're not.
No.
We really aren't. NRL are far better at that than we are. There's no doubt about that.
Yep.
In our NRL, it was just accepted that this guy's changing clubs, but get on with it. Rah,
Yep.
rah. But, yeah, AFL, I
Are we
don't...
still very tribal-based with our clubs?
I think we are,
Yep.
but also I do agree with the point that, hang on, how can a captain go, mate? You're captain, you're meant to be selling your club. Like, how can Oscar Allen at the moment be selling West Coast,
Yep.
trying to keep a Harley Reid, etc., when he's thinking of leaving himself?
Yep.
I totally agree with Damien Barrett. I think his position as captain is untenable.
Yep. Would this be happening if West Coast weren't struggling as much as they are right now?
It'd certainly get less publicity and less.
Yep.
And also, if Oscar Allen was dominating, the fact he's struggling to get a kick himself as well isn't helping.
Yep. It looks like there's only two suitors out there, Hawthorn
I
and
reckon
Brisbane.
I reckon there'd be other
couple
clubs behind the scenes. Be still.
Well, let's talk about players gone past. Chris Judd, another one, probably in the same boat.
Yeah, but at least it was at the end of the year. There was a little bit of
Decorum.
Yeah, I don't think it was anywhere near like this as
Yep.
And
Well, I mean, we're only 3 games into a
and
season.
people, I laugh where people are having a go at Mitchell. No way, I'm quite. If I'm barracking for Hawthorn, I'm saying that's superb. He
Yep.
got out. He sold the club to get Barras and Battle.
He's doing the same thing
Same
now.
thing there.
Yep.
He's doing his job. I'd more say. And look, you've got St Kilda are staying here for 2 weeks.
Yes.
Over the next because they play 2 weeks in a row in
Yep.
South Australia. South Australian, both clubs will be negligent in not trying to sell to
Matthias Filippo.
Oh no, more Wangan. I think
Wangan
Malira because he's coming out of contract.
Yep.
So things like that, yeah, you've got to. And I know Eddie Betts was about 5 years in the planning before Adelaide got him. So
Yep.
clubs playing a long time way out, and you
Absolutely.
have to with lists of
Well,
what you think is there.
What generally happens is if 2 years before the free agency or a restricted free agent or whatever is generally when a lot of clubs get into you or get into players. Were you surprised, and I'm not sure whether you've heard this, but Rory Sloane was approached by St Kilda and a burner Instagram account and they did a whole presentation. Were you surprised?
No, I had heard that around the traps
Yep.
at one stage. So, yeah, I wasn't surprised.
No. And then the other one for me was Kane Corns came out and said that Adelaide, he approached Adelaide, not Adelaide approached him.
Oh, look, with Kane, and look, to Graham, and we'll all have pot shots at Graham.
Yep.
Graham, and he can be pretty frustrating
Yes.
and all that. So can any of us.
Yep.
But to Graham's credit, he was prepared to go on the board, which would have made Chad and Kane, the rules back then.
Yes.
Counted that if you be a coach and then on the board counted his years. So
Yep.
Graham was prepared to do that after being sacked as coach. I think that's huge.
Yeah.
Compliments to Graham
Yep.
there.
I actually didn't know that.
Yeah, back then that he was
Yep.
prepared to do that, and that would have made both those two eligible as father-son rule
Yep.
things. So,
Would that have changed the landscape for Adelaide?
massively.
Do you think during that period?
Yeah, yeah.
Considering how good of players they were?
Well, you had both those two. And if James Fantasia has got his way of recruiting back then, the Crows would have ended up with both Kane Corns and Sean Burgoyne.
Yep.
So you think that changes football up dramatically?
Yep.
People, if you're out there thinking, Oh, no, it couldn't have been. I looked through the draft numbers. No, Adelaide wouldn't have given up as much as what they did for Matty Bode.
Mm-hmm.
Adelaide gave more there than what they should have. That's how it would have worked.
Yep. That's the key, isn't it? Is being able to have that poker hand and play it to the best of your ability. Are you yay or nay for the open talks with players? Yes for players, no for captains?
Yeah, I'm certainly a no for captains. Yep. I don't like players doing it, but I've got to grow up.
Yep.
To say it is.
Yep. It is part of the new way of things.
Yeah.
All right, injuries are starting to play a part for some teams early in the season. It's one of those bugbears. How do we fix it? Is it a slightly longer preseason but less workload, or a shorter preseason?
There's also, it's just pot luck as well. Like poor young Edwards did his knee. He's got an ACL from Essendon.
Yep.
And that innocuous thing at training.
Yep.
And Caldwell pulled his hamstring in the same day.
Yep.
And just at training.
These things happen.
And also, in terms of Rochelle, he just got the spot and cracked the 3 ribs. Now, if that gets you a little bit further round, you saw, you play within a week or even the next game.
Yep.
So that's just pot luck.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking about injuries early on in the season, the big thing that's sort of come out a little bit today is State of Origin. Looks like it's going to get back on the agenda somehow, some way, because the players are wanting it.
Yeah.
Pre-season seems to be the spot that it's going to be played.
I think it has to be pre-season. I can't see it any other time.
Is it going to have the following or the buy-in, I suppose, from the public like it used to?
Personally, I'm not sure. Look, but you think the start of the year that
everyone's itching for a bit of footy.
Yeah, everyone's itching, but also you think there was I think they get 36,000 it was to the Indigenous All-Stars game Freo, which meant nothing.
Yep.
So, I think when we're all craving footy,
it could be a good time to play it. What do you think about the grand final being pushed back for a couple of years there because of other events? It's going to eat into the cricket season, mate. I know you're not going to be too happy about that.
No, I read that, shook my head this morning. Yet again, as we know, AFL will try and invent another day in the year so they can have it for not only including leap years for 367 days.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Melbourne, Carlton and West Coast all without a win in 2025. Who's the biggest concern for you?
Carlton have still got a reasonable draw to come. And let's also remember Hawthorn lost their first 5 games last year, and then
got on a bit of a run.
If Sicily runs straight at goal, they beat Port here, and they're playing in the prelim final.
Mm-hmm.
And Brisbane last year, I think we all jumped too early.
Okay.
But I think there's alarm bells there for both, well and truly, and also just I think it's right to have a go at Carlton's game style. I don't think they run it well enough and use the ball. It's just boot it.
Yep.
29 extra 50s round 1 and managed to lose the unlosable game against Richmond.
Yep.
They've been in front all 3 games.
Yep. So does that work rate? You're talking game plan, but is it work rate though?
Yeah, I don't think his use of the ball well enough. I do think if you look at the Carlton list, there's a lack of elite ball users there. I think that's very true.
As a Carlton man, again, we talk about that 18 to 25. That's where I think we're lacking. Yeah, and as soon as one or two things go wrong, it just changes everything. It changes the entire complexion of their team. And
they lack a small forward, Carlton. They're debuting Will White tomorrow night.
Yep.
Sort of, and picked out of nowhere.
Yep.
Sort of thing. They gave Matt Owies the flick, and I still found that weird.
I
thought he was Carlton's best all-round small forward.
Agreed.
And I love Razzle Dazzle in terms of as an Nord man, but how Orazio got another year has me beat.
That might be on the friends and friends with.
That's nothing against Razzle.
No, not at all. Not at all. That might have been just his connection, obviously, with Vossi over here in Port Adelaide. All right, last one on the AFL before we get to some tips. Harley Reid, why is he such a target? Have teams gone too far, or the industry gone too far on him?
Oh, look, while I don't think he's helped himself at times, I do think they have. It seems to be. And look, he was front page of the paper over in Perth, front, back page, virtually every day.
Yep.
Like, it was just insane.
Yep.
It is.
So as an
it has
industry,
been
do we have to be careful of
I
how?
think so. I'd hate to be a Harley Reid.
Yep.
Yeah.
Harley Reid or Rao? Because they're both similar styles.
Yeah, Rao's now developed this body. Now, whether Harley can go away and do that, improve his sprinting ability from there, whether he wants to, whether he's that much a student of the game that Rao is.
Yep.
Yeah, when Rao was injured, he was taking notes on,
In the coach's box, on the ground,
whether he's enough of a footy nut on that, I'm not sure.
Yep. Have teams worked him out that if they get him to buy into some of the byplay that it does upset?
He's certainly not helping himself.
Gotcha. Yeah. All right, let's talk this week's games. We won't worry about last week's games because obviously we're running short on time. Collingwood v Carlton, MCG Thursday night.
You have to go for Collingwood.
Carlton for me, I think it's going to be time.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
I think Collingwood are going to be very, very good, but I reckon Carlton might just, again, the arch enemy, it sometimes happens. Yep. Geelong v Melbourne.
I'll go Geelong, but it is at Cardinia Park, whatever you want to call it. There, I should memorise all the sponsors.
No, you're right. GMHBA.
GMHBA. I'll go the Cats.
Yep, I'll go the Cats as well, but I expect a response from Melbourne.
Yep.
All right, game of the round, which you generally wouldn't be saying about these two teams, but Gold Coast v Adelaide.
I do think, in terms of the time slot, is a big advantage too, with generally humidity for the home side there. I think that's a big advantage. Yep. And look, as I've said, I rate their list enormously. Yep. I'll go Gold Coast.
I'll go Gold Coast, but only just. Previous years, I think the last 3 times that Adelaide have played on the Gold Coast or in Darwin in these type of conditions, they've led for good parts of the game and then fall away, and I think that will happen once again. Yeah. And it's just a acclimatisation, isn't it, really?
At least it's not tipped to be quite as hot on Saturday, but I just still think I still say teams have got to get up there earlier.
Yep. Absolutely. Richmond v the Brisbane Lions.
Well, look, it's quite ridiculous that Brisbane, I think it's 2014 is the last time I think they've beaten Richmond and Melbourne, but surely that'll give Fagan a bit of ammunition this week.
Absolutely.
So you'd think Brisbane
easily. For me there. North Melbourne v Sydney.
I reckon this will be the closest game of the round.
Yeah, I think it's going to be pretty close.
I'll go Sydney, but I really think on Saturday night, I reckon I might go along to the Archibald to watch that. I reckon it'll be a good game.
Make sure you bring your wallets, because I'm assuming that Malcolm might have a few books to sell along the way. But if not, have a good chat. I think North Melbourne actually are going to get the chocolates because it's at Marvel. I think if it was at the MCG, maybe Sydney. If it was at the SCG, I'd definitely be picking Sydney. But I reckon North Melbourne are a team that are going to upset a few along the way this year. Just
trying to think too. Papley injured too is pretty crucial. So yeah,
absolutely. GWS v West Coast.
Yeah, I'll go GWS.
GWS for me. Port Adelaide v St Kilda. This becomes a really interesting game now, doesn't it?
I really reckon it's. While I give St Kilda a good chance, Port generally rebound at home.
Absolutely, Port Adelaide for me, but only just. Fremantle v the Western Bulldogs in another game that could potentially be very, very close.
If in doubt, go the home side.
For Fremantle. Me, Fremantle as well. All right, Essendon and Hawthorn have the bye. We will flag it early now. Next week, Gather Round. So we'll be out and about and doing bits and pieces for Gather Round as well. All right, let's move on. Let's actually take a very, very quick break.
You're listening to the Game On Podcast. We'll be right back after this short break.
Looking to buy or sell your home anywhere in Adelaide, from the hills to the sea? Meet Gary KRIEVS, your dedicated local agent from OUWENS CASSERLY Real Estate. With unparalleled knowledge of Adelaide's housing market and a commitment to exceptional service, Gary ensures a smooth and stress-free experience for all your real estate needs. Trust the expert, trust Gary KRIEVS at OUWENS CASSERLY Real Estate. Your next dream home awaits. Contact Gary today on 0422 071 317 or on email garyk@ocre.com.au. And for more listings, please visit owenscasserly.com.au. Make it happen. All right, and I've actually done things around the wrong way. Coming up, we're going to talk about the Adelaide United in the soccer. And round one of the SANFL matches are complete. And what a shot from Josh Giddey from the half-court line. It was an absolute beauty. All right, thanks for bearing with us. We had a few little technical issues there, but we've got them all sorted out now. Mate, Adelaide United once again going down. That's one win from their last 9 games. Slipped to 6th on the ladder.
Yet again, 5 goals against. It's just ridiculous. They're losing. If you're scoring 3 goals,
yes,
generally you should be winning 80%
yep.
in terms of soccer, football, whatever you
yes.
call.
I mean, they're scoring, but they're also giving up a lot as well.
So, just ridiculous how many goals they're conceding. And, it's quite crazy. So
absolutely. Yeah. Rumours are rife about the coach potentially being served his papers at the end of the season. Does this happen because of the 1-9 loss, or is there's a little bit more meat on the bone?
Look, I don't think Carl holds back on anything, which
is good and bad.
Yeah, can upset that age group now. So, wait and see. But I like Calvid. I like that he wears his heart on his sleeve.
Absolutely, and a good development coach that's there as well. The PSG relationship there looks like it's going to flow through the club. Yeah. Maybe the coaching is part of that as well. All right, let's move on to the SANFL. Round 1 matches are completed. And guess what? The reigning premiers get off to an absolutely cracking start against Port Adelaide.
Yeah, Port's injuries at AFL level really mean they're down on numbers, therefore at SANFL level, despite the ridiculous concessions they did receive.
Yep.
And Glenelg in terms of picking lines up, Partington back.
Yep.
They're well and truly the SANFL's the best SANFL team at the moment.
Absolutely. The game of the round was Central's v the Eagles, Woodville West Torrens. Central's getting up with a goal very, very late in the day there to get up by a point.
Came back from 21 points down at 3/4 time to win by a point. So the Ponderosa would have gone off.
Absolutely. Would have liked to have been on the in the club rooms there after that game. There would have been plenty going on. Adelaide showing some dominance there over West Adelaide.
Yeah, look, you only had to see the Adelaide side, and I was with a West Adelaide guy on Saturday morning, and he said, "Oh, geez, looking at that Adelaide side," and I said, "Yeah." So that was expected. 15, 16 goals, about what I would have expected.
Is that what West Adelaide? I mean, Adelaide are Adelaide at the moment, but is that really what they needed in a year where they need to put something on the board? Off ground, on ground, everything together.
It wasn't a great side for them to draw first up.
Yeah, yep. Sturt getting up over South Adelaide there at McGain Stadium, South Adelaide's home ground there, down at Panther Park, or not Panther Park anymore, but it is for them. Yep. Sturt just flexing their muscles a little bit.
Yeah, did what they had to do. Well and truly, pretty comfortable win over South there. And look, I was at Nord, obviously, on Saturday night. And look,
just before you talk about that, how good was it to see SANFL football on Saturday night on free-to-air television?
Yeah, it'd be interesting. I haven't heard anything about the ratings, how it went, considering, and that I know there's been criticism of the AFL not being on, and that allowed the Athletics to get a free hit, and apparently that rated its socks off, but I haven't heard on the SANFL how it went. Look,
is this an opportunity for the SANFL to cash in?
Hopefully, in general. Look.
And, all right, let's talk about the game now.
Yeah,
all credit to North Adelaide. They were the better side, but Nord do have some injuries that are going to play a little bit of a part for the first 4 or 5 games of the season, aren't
there? There is also massive frustration. Alex Van Wyck was best on ground. He's won the last 2 years reserves, best and fairest at Nord. I think it's absolutely ridiculous that he didn't play league footy in the last couple of years. And if he had have played a few games, I think he would have been leading Nord's first ruck on Saturday night. I think there was a bit of lack of planning there by Nord. It was very short-sighted, in my opinion. And
did they expect to hold on to Harry for another couple of years?
Yeah, I just thought it was just like, I've got to be careful.
No.
And GT's filled out. I think I will say now, I'll be very surprised if Alex isn't picked up in the mid-season draft. That he was sensational. Look, there's the big question about Alex is previously his good's very good, but he can fall away. There's probably a bit of a lack of
That
in the
in
middle.
between, yep.
So it'll be interesting to see how he goes the next few weeks. But he was fantastic on Saturday night.
All right, let's move on to our tips for this week's games. What have you got there, mate? We've got the Panthers v the Bloods.
Yeah, it's down at McGain Stadium.
Yep.
I'll go south.
Sturt v Port Adelaide at Thomas Farm, or
yes.
Sturt's home oval.
Darren Thomas.
Yep.
Thomas Farm, a fantastic sponsor in general of sport. The
Yep.
Duck. I'll go Sturt.
Sturt for me. North Adelaide v the Crows.
Yeah, so they lose a couple because Rochelle and someone will travel, so they lose a couple there. But look, I'll still go Adelaide.
I'll still go Adelaide there. Woodville West Torrens v Norwood.
After Norwood on Saturday, I can't tip Norwood at the moment.
No, and
I'm hoping I'm wrong, but I'll go Woodville West Torrens.
well, we sort of did this a little bit early last year where we picked against Norwood and they actually did all right. It's down at Montine Oval, where the pasties, as you keep saying, are always spicier.
Spicy.
The Eagles for me. And Glenelg v Centrals in probably the game of the round.
It is the game of the round, but I'll go the Tigers.
Absolutely. All right, we might, because we are running out of time tonight, we might just leave the SANFLW till next week. But coming up, we've got Darren Webber, part 1 on Friday. Fantastic interview with Darren. And Scotty Borlay's part 2. So we missed out last week, so we better play it this week.
Catch up with Borlaka this week as Brisbane. I think Brisbane are at.
You're listening to the Game On Podcast. We'll be right back after this short break.
A dents and scratches putting a dent in your day? Introducing Roger Steen Crash Repairs Adelaide, your trusted solution for automotive woes. With over 2 decades of expertise, Roger Steen Crash Repairs guarantees top-notch service, restoring your vehicle to its former glory in no time. From minor dings to major collisions, our skilled technicians handle it all with precision and care, using state-of-the-art equipment and techniques.
Roger Steen Crash Repairs saved my car. It looks brand new.
Fast, friendly and reliable. I wouldn't trust anyone else with my vehicle. Don't let accidents slow you down. Visit Roger Steen Crash Repairs Adelaide at 14 Penner Avenue, Glynde, for quality service you can count on. And here's a special offer just for our listeners. Mention this podcast and receive a $100 discount on your repair. Roger Steen Crash Repairs Adelaide. Excellence in every repair.
Flashbacks.
Now, mate, we normally with our flashbacks go back in time to look at something from a way, way, way ago, but it was just too good a opportunity tonight, obviously, with the episode, just to relive that moment once again. All right, let's get into the extra ends, mate.
Extra time. Big finish.
All right, we'll whiz through these pretty quickly tonight. The NRL star player wants out of his club. Hasn't made any secret about it, and now it's turned a little bit nasty. Daly Cherry Evans.
Yeah, but he's getting a bit aggressive and interesting.
We talked earlier on about the AFL and the maturity that the NRL show, but when one of the better players disappears, players aren't exactly happy, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting how it has got so nasty, actually.
Yeah, look, it's one of those things that you don't want to see a star player leave your club, and for whatever reason it might be. It's going to be an interesting watch over the next couple of weeks. Are you surprised the Panthers have started the season without too many wins on the board, considering they have won the last 3 or 4 grand finals?
It has been a bit of a surprise that they've potentially falling away, but as we know, it is a long season.
Absolutely right there. All right, let's move on to the NBA. Giddy's buzzer beater, one of the best shots an Aussie will ever make, but wasn't it absolutely unbelievable?
And the commentary, the Crocodile Dundee
There
line.
you go. Love it.
Yeah.
Basically, if you actually watch the last 2 minutes of that game,
it's ridiculous.
He actually single-handedly changed that, and then to
Oh.
have the ball in his hand with
Incredible.
merely seconds to go and hits it from half court was just
It was huge.
unbelievable.
It was incredible.
All right, let's move on to golf. Minwoo Lee takes out his maiden PGA title in Houston. Fantastic achievement. Looked like he was going to fall in a bit of a hole there, but steadied the ship.
Yeah, he might be able to sponsor the show, I reckon. I don't think he's going to be struggling for a while. Mate.
Yes, we'll get Craig onto that one there for us, see if he could help us out along the way there. All right, let's move on to netball. We did say it a couple of weeks ago. We did get it a little bit wrong, but we have got it right. The Thunderbirds take on the Melbourne Vixens week 1, which is obviously the 5th of April, in the start of the new netball Super League season. Good luck to the Thunderbirds. We always like them winning potentially a back-to-back, which would be fantastic.
Back-to-back.
Correct. All right, let's move on to tennis. James Duckworth was Australia's most prominent player in action this week. Reached his 28th ATP Challenger final in Morelia in Mexico there.
He's pretty consistent,
That's
Duckworth,
what I was going to say.
isn't he?
That's what I was going to say. I didn't realise this until obviously doing a bit of research. 28 ATP Challenger finals. That's a pretty fair effort for a player. But you want to see him take that next step, don't you?
Yeah. Yep. Geez, he keeps presenting and having a crack.
Absolutely. And some of those events help you continue to travel the world and play on those events. All right, let's move on with a couple of last-minute questions. Australian athletics, we did talk about it. They're having a moment at the moment on the track. Normally it's in the pool, but track and field, they're actually going pretty well.
Probably the best we've been for a long time. And, the rightly hysteria on Gout. Partly, I think, the names as well.
Absolutely.
And apparently the ratings were ridiculous on the weekend. So we might try and see if we can find that out.
Absolutely. All right. Let's talk. Tasmanian Stadium is hanging by a thread.
I think that's a good description.
Yeah, because costs going to blow out and time delays. Where does that leave them at? Is it a delay to the start of their club, or do they play out of Launceston or Hobart?
There's a lot of things still to potentially happen there.
Yep. Brendan Gay would be a worried man, wouldn't he?
He would be, well and truly.
Considering it looks like the everything's hinging on the roof being on the stadium as well. Mate, the good, the bad, the ugly for this week. Got anything good? Obviously the Sheffield
South
Shield.
Australia. Just look, bad was the cameras. I've made no secret there.
Yep.
And I'd love people to turn up, not just when a team's about to win a championship.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Out of that, and I reckon that probably covers the whole box and dice.
Absolutely. All right, let's leave it there for tonight. As per usual, like, rate, subscribe, mate. We have to do better than this, which we will next week. Thank you very much for everyone that's listening, and obviously last week. Apologies for last week, but we're back and ready and raring to fire this week.
And thanks for Darren Potsy Webber tonight.
Absolutely, and we'll see. And his interview will be on Friday. Yep. We'll see everybody next week. Thanks, mate.
In this crazy world we live in, we all need the distraction. Enjoying the show? Like, rate, and subscribe. Hook up and connect with us on social media at SportsCast SA. We'll see you next time on Game On.